everyone, and a very happy Victober to you. So this is Kate in the past, pre-filming a Victober video, and I wanted today to talk about my Victober 5-star TBR predictions I made last year, and to tell you how many of them were 5-star, what I thought of them. And yeah, let's just chat about the books. So last year I made a list of 10 Victorian books that I thought might achieve a 5-star rating. Now the first on the list was King Solomon's Mines, and this is by H. Rider Haggard. I had never read any H. Rider Haggard before last Victober when I read She, or rather I started She. And as soon as I don't even know how far I got in, but I could tell it was not at all the story I was hoping it was going to be. It was going to be very much plot driven. The characters were going to feel like types and not fully fleshed out characters, and I just couldn't be motivated to continue. It just, the style of characterization, I just knew, like, this is not going to be, they're going to be one-dimensional. I'm not going to be interested in this. It's just not at all my style of adventure tale. And having read Treasure Island, I know that I can love adventure stories, and it just wasn't serving my time well because it would have set me into a reading slump, and I just need Victober to be great. So that being said, then that completely took any motivation to read King Solomon's Mines away. So I'm not saying never about H. Rider Haggard, but I'm saying that for now it is not at all a priority, and I am okay with that. So, an anticlimactic beginning to this list. The next one on the list was Idylls of the King by Alfred Lord Tennyson. And finally, I'm remembering to call it Idylls of the King before I kept mispronouncing it. This was an absolutely stunning work of literature to behold. It uses a lot of the Arthurian legends and puts them into narrative poem style. And the language is absolutely breathtaking. It was interesting to me, though, how many dysfunctional relationships could be fit into one giant narrative poem. So each section follows a different character. I did find it also really interesting. Some of the fairy tale retellings that I've read that feel very tragic, I'm like, ooh, wow, no, look at this tragedy and this tragedy in the Arthurian legend. So I do think there is this real weightiness to fairy tales, and, you know, Disney tries to clean them up, but I think there is supposed to be kind of really terrible evil that people have to battle as a contrast to the good that is in the world. So this was so beautiful. It's one that I think would be endlessly rereadable. I loved the audiobook that I did immersion reading, listening to the audiobook, but reading the physical book at the same time. And it was just such a beautiful reading experience. So I think I'll definitely be rereading Idylls of the King. I think it was just, the language was so rich and there's so much that you could get out of it. And I think it's going to be the start of a very beautiful relationship with Tennyson, because poetry is definitely a weak spot for me, but narrative poetry seems to be kind of where I can really get my oar in and find my footing. So that one was definitely a big, giant 5 stars. And then the third one on the list was The Belton Estate by Anthony Trollope. This also received 5 stars. This is now an all-time favorite Anthony Trollope. Definitely my favorite standalone. I haven't read too many standalones by Trollope. So I've read The Way We Live Now, Lady Anna, The Claverings, and then I think The Belton Estate is the only other, Dr. Wardle's School. But this is definitely the favorite of those. And there was something about the story that just felt so light and easy to get into. I really loved how quickly I came to love the characters in this. And as I'm filming this, it's funny because it's the same weekend that we had the discussions on my Patreon of it. It felt like a pretty bread and butter novel, but then it's been really fun to discuss the book with other readers and pull even more richness out of it. And I think that Victorian literature just is that way. There's a lot of layers that you can unpack. Even with a Trollope novel that seems rather simple, there was just something about it that was so pure. And, you know, sometimes you want, something really fancy. You want a really fancy ice cream sundae. And then other times you just want vanilla ice cream, really high quality vanilla ice cream. And this was like that. And it just satisfied me so much with the simplicity of it. And I think it's also because I had just read Can You Forgive Her, which is a lot more complex in all of the different plots it's juggling. And then Phineas Finn, which I didn't really enjoy very much. And so then to read The Belton Estate, which only had one big plot line in it, and just the characters were felt so fresh and new, and I immediately came to love most of them. I really love this. So I highly recommend The Belton Estate. I do know that some readers find Clara, our main character, very frustrating with how she goes so back and forth on her decisions. And I totally grant that that is very frustrating. I think I just loved so much else about the book that it didn't... My frustrations with Clara were so small because of how much I was overall enjoying the book. So a huge 5 stars there. Then the next one was The Egoist by George Meredith. I am scared to talk about this on here because anytime I talk about a more intellectual classic, the men on BookTube love to come out and lecture me on how I should be reading that book. So I got 25% of the way through and could not be bothered to continue. I could not be bothered. The writing was so unbelievably dense. And here's the thing. I'm willing to work hard on a book. The Ring in the Book by Robert Browning, which is a narrative poem, and I was really out of my depth for a lot of it. I worked hard because the reward I got out of it, made it feel worth it. George Eliot's novels, the reward feels worth it. I knew the 25% that I read, I was not going to get that reward. So it was just going to be a really arduous process. And when I realized 25% through and how I had X amount of chapters left, I just felt like crying, thinking about having to get through the rest of that book. And I thought, who am I trying to prove something to? This is reading for leisure. I'm not taking a class where I need to know about the book. No. So I did not read The Egoist, and I am extremely okay with that. Okay, the next one that I read was Moonfleet. And this one was a really lovely surprise. I didn't really know what to go in expecting. I think I thought kind of like Treasure Island, and it did have some aspects that felt a bit like Treasure Island. I will say it's never going to rank as highly as Treasure Island for me, but it's one that I can definitely wholeheartedly recommend to people. Oh, if you would like a fun adventure story. And I found the village of Moonfleet to be a really just engaging kind of setting for the story to start out in. Now a lot of the story doesn't take place in Moonfleet. And it was just very much, I had no idea what was going to happen with the story. I had no idea it had so much to do with smuggling, which I found absolutely fascinating. So I definitely enjoyed it. I definitely recommend it. I think though, unfortunately, it only got 4 stars. So I did really enjoy it. I recommend it. And maybe if I had read it before Treasure Island, it would have been different. But it's one I definitely want to go back and reread as well. Then the next one that I read was Torn Sails by Alan Raine. And this one I wanted to read because I had heard a few positive reviews, and Alan Raine's A Welsh Witch is one of my all-time favorite Victorian novels. So I was disappointed to not fall in love with this. The writing is still beautiful. I really, really loved just her setting the stage for this, Welsh coastal setting, and it didn't feel like it could take place anywhere else. It felt so integral to the story. I think that there were not really any characters that I fell in love with and were supposed to be rooting for them, as opposed to Wuthering Heights. You're like, look at the futile actions of these characters. But in this, I just didn't feel like I could root for anyone. There's a very stressful love triangle that happens, and the way it was executed, it just made me so uncomfortable that I couldn't relax and enjoy the story at all. And then there is an incredibly tragic thing that happens, and that, we all have our threshold, and it was just way past my threshold. So unfortunately, I didn't really enjoy Torn Sails. Then the next one was The Perpetual Curate by Margaret Oliphant. This did end up getting 5 stars for me. And Margaret Oliphant's writing, I always find, as opposed to Gaskell or Charlotte Mary Yonge, her writing always takes a little bit more work for me to get through, so it's interesting. I feel like it takes kind of the same concentration that George Eliot does, but our plots feel a lot more similar to Gaskell or Charlotte Mary Yonge. And in this book, the curate, the Perpetual Curate, has fallen in love. And in this town with a job of being a Perpetual Curate, he does not have very much income. And so what does he kind of have to offer to this young lady who he is in love with? I think the element, though, that then took it up several notches for me is he has 3 overly involved aunts that come to stay and are just so nosy, and they're busybodies, and just the way it's written about, I was incredibly charmed by it. So I really enjoyed The Perpetual Cure. I gave it 5 stars. I was so glad to have read it. So Margaret Oliphant's writing has been very hit or miss with me. Miss Marchbanks seems to be a fan favorite, and I did not enjoy it at all. So I don't understand, because it's also one of the Carlingford Chronicles books. And I am still, though, excited then to try the other books in the Carlingford Chronicles. I've read Salem Chapel, and The Doctor's Family, but I have Phoebe Jr., and then I can't remember, there's one other one in the Carlingford Chronicles to read from. Then the next one that I read was Mr. Harrison's Confessions by Elizabeth Gaskell. And unfortunately, I really didn't enjoy this much. I think it got a 3 stars at most. I was really surprised by how much I didn't enjoy this, because it is Elizabeth Gaskell. And usually, even if I'm not as impressed with the characters, I'll enjoy the story so much that it still gets a very high rating, like Mary Barton or Sylvia's Lovers. But in this one, I think the story... I think the brevity of this, it is more, it's almost a short story. It's very, very brief. And so I just have a really hard time connecting as on a deep level as I would if it were a novel length. So it was a bit of a miss for me. Then Man and Wife by Wilkie Collins. I can't believe just the luck I had with this, because I've been really hit or miss with Wilkie Collins. And this one just blew me absolutely away. It has now become my favorite Wilkie Collins book. So this definitely gets a huge 5 stars. I think the energy that is in this book that propels you to keep reading is astounding. And I was incredibly invested in what was going to happen to these characters. And it gets thrilling towards the end, and I had no idea kind of the twists and turns that were going to happen. And he just has such vividly written characters in this. I think the characters are the star of the show, even though I got to the end and there was no character like, oh, I love that character, oh, I love that character. There was one character that I very much detested and had hardly any sympathy for, but other than that, I just had so much fun. It was just a wild ride and had a lot of layers to the story. And it just, he would not speed up perfection. I think it unfolds at exactly the right amount. You definitely have to be willing to commit, for a bit to read before you're going to feel like the reading comes easily. But I just loved it so much. So I definitely recommend Man and Wife. I think that's the highlight out of this list. Maybe the Belton Estate, but they're such different books. It's apples and oranges. Then the last one on the list is The Stokesley Secret by Charlotte Mary Yonge. And I picked this because I thought, ooh, Charlotte Mary Yonge writing a sensation novel. It is not at all a sensation novel. It's very par for the course with Charlotte Mary Yonge, a kind of family saga following the ups and downs and the moral dilemmas that these characters are put in. And it is a fairly academic novel. They have a governess, and she is just, trying to do the best that she can with this group of rambunctious children, and their parents are away for the majority of the book. And so then when the siblings have different disagreements, and she is really struggling kind of what decision should she be making about the disagreements that they have. It's a really hard place for her to be put in. And so I found the home education aspects really lovely about this book. I loved getting to hear about how she was tutoring them at home. So I definitely enjoyed it. I think, though, it was a little brief for me, and the characters didn't quite come alive as in other Charlotte Mary Yonge books. There were a couple of the siblings that I thought, I don't really feel that I know them that well. So I did overall, I mean, I just love Charlotte Mary Yonge's writing, and I'm going to keep exploring all of her catalog. Slowly but surely, I will make it through. So did definitely enjoy it, but maybe not a favorite Charlotte Mary Yonge. So that is my 5-star TBR wrap up. It was a lot of fun doing this project again. It had been several years since I made a Victober 5-star TBR. So I definitely had fun kind of working on this throughout the course of the year. And I am going to be releasing a 2023 5-star TBR, and I hope that you enjoyed watching this video. I hope you are having the best Victober, and I will be back with another video soon. Bye!